Top of Mind with Hao and Chris. Today is Friday, February 21st, 9:37 in the morning Pacific time. Today is episode 66 of Top of Mind, and we're going to be talking about Trump's FTC.
The federal worker reduction?
International stocks are beating U.S. That's news.
Yeah. And rest in peace, the U.S. penny.
Yeah. No more .99. We'll see. We'll see if that actually changes. All right, let's get rolling here. So Trump's FTC, a lot has been in the news on the FTC. And how I'd love what you're reading and love some insights on what you think about how this will affect corporate mergers and kind of what your outlook is on the environment. So why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, this one surprised me a bit because the assumption was Trump comes in and he's going to loosen up some of the regulation, specifically with the FTC. Mm-hmm. The SEC, it looks like let's go back to the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission. It looks like things have loosened up there, obviously with crypto and things like that. But this is the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. I know the government has a lot of commissions. We'll kind of get to that, but this one, it looks like in a surprise turn, I guess not so surprising if you kind of look at Trump's history, is they're going to keep a lot of the strict guidelines that were adopted by the Biden administration. And anyone who's listened to us, we've mentioned that this is probably the most aggressive FTC in terms of going after mergers, right? They famously struck down the Albertsons-Kroger deal.
Yep.
Over monopoly accusations, but again, if they're competing with the likes of Walmart, Aldi, Target, Costco, I don't know what measurement they're using, but that seemed to me pretty strict, right? Mm-hmm. So in this case, they're going to keep really that strict guardrail that was put in place by Lena Khan, who has since stepped down from the election, who was running the FTC. She was a Biden appointee, but it looks like they're going to get someone as aggressive as she was. So the era of free-falling mergers and acquisitions seems to be a little bit premature. We have to see how aggressive. It does look like from history that they're going to target specific companies that, Trump doesn't like. Is that appropriate? In my opinion, no, but it should be more objective. But we'll see how much sway this particular FTC has over the next 4 years.
Lena Khan stepping down was pretty quiet. Like, I know it was anticipated that would happen with the outcome of the elections, but I didn't see a big announcement or anything like that. She just kind of disappeared.
A lot of Biden appointees just quietly left. Yeah, so
update their LinkedIn profile looking for work.
Yeah, I think Gary Gensler, who was the head of the SEC, said he was stepping down like the day after the election. So
he did say that. I remember that.
Yeah. So there were a lot of heads of departments that just left or intend to leave before things really, shift towards the Trump administration here.
So you're saying that you don't think there's going to be a lot of change in the FTC? Yeah,
the administration came out, like the Trump's administration put out a DOJ statement saying they're going to keep a lot of the policies in place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
this isn't like an assumption. This is actually what the Trump administration is saying.
Include mergers not significantly increasing concentration in already highly concentrated markets, not eliminating substantial competition between firms, and avoid vertical mergers that create market structures that for close competition. Okay, so how did the market react to this? Because as we covered on this right after the elections, the market spiked mid and small cap stocks. And the theory around that was because there would be a increase in M&A activity. And also they spiked financials. Financials has been one of the best performing sectors since the election. and that's because M&A activity is supposed to heat up, and M&A is one of the biggest contributions to bottom lines for banks. And then further, banks released earnings in, I believe it was January, for Q4 and confirmed that M&A activity has already picked up. So what do you make of all that? The market's pricing in one thing, but now we're saying something different.
Yeah, since the election, let me just get the dates here. Since the election, small caps are down 7%. Financials are, I'm going to say flat, but they're up 3%. And then mid cap is flat at negative 0.47%. So all those gains were
What's the S&P?
relatively short-lived, yeah. The S&P during that time is, I have this is compelling audio here. I had the S&P index, not the S&P ETF. So my chart shows 3.6% since the election.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So all the initial optimism has really faded away. Again, I sound like a broken record, but interest rates have been a more powerful force than the assumption of mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah. And the market is basically forecasting slightly less rates today, slightly lower rates compared to today, but not by much, right?
Nope. Yeah, and rates did, specifically the 10-year. And again, I think we need to clarify when we refer to rates, because rates could be all kinds of things, right? But we specifically tend to poke at the 10-year Treasury, which did spike after the election because Trump's policies do seem to be growthy, and then the bond market is responding by pushing up rates in the 10-year, which have come down a little bit, but they were very close to 5%, and right now they're settling in at 4.45%, and that has all kinds of ramifications, right? That's what the mortgage rates are really predicated on, and that's why mortgage rates haven't really come down at all. Mm-hmm. I know this administration, despite their policies, have been trying to, strong arm the Fed into lowering rates, but it doesn't seem like the Fed's gonna budge in this case because their issue is inflation. And if we're more growthy in our economy and our economic policy, well, the fear is inflation could come back.
All right, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, this is interesting because one of my predictions for 2025 was that it was going to be an M&A frenzy, and we would see a ton of IPOs. We would see a record in IPOs, in fact, with the exception of 2021, when it was the SPAC frenzy. So we'll see. Maybe this blows up one of my recommendations, but hey, or predictions, excuse me. But hey, we'll see. That's good.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, and again, it's quick. It's quick to point out that a new administration is coming in, and there's this either negativity or optimism. It seems like the initial pop in terms of like the Teslas have been overly optimistic, and we're seeing quite a bit of that stuff fade away. Again, we point to that chart too of the Democrats suddenly feeling lousy about the economy and the Republicans suddenly feeling good. Yeah, nothing's changed since November. Yeah, and we're a month and a day into this new administration. I would venture to say that this group has definitely created more headlines than actual substance at this point. But it's only been a month, so we always measure the new presidency by 100 days. We have 70 more days of this if you're patient.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, first 100 days, we're nowhere near. Okay. So speaking of headlines, federal workers have been in the news a lot in the last couple of weeks, and there's been an offer, buyout offer, and layoffs and firings and things. And so we thought we would just spend a couple of minutes and share A, what's going on, and B, what's our perspective on all of it. So why don't you kick us off, this whole federal worker reduction thing? What are you reading? How can you make sense of it for our listeners, and what do you think the impacts are, both good and bad?
Sure. Yeah, we don't have an exact count. So right now, these are just preliminary estimates. But the goal of Doge is to reduce the federal headcount. But they're doing it in a way where they're going after probationary employees versus tenured employees. Right? Federal workers are represented by a union, so they're going to have a little bit tougher time laying off union workers without negotiating with the union first or without violating union contract law, right? So,
Yep.
so the target has been probationary people, but if you're probationary, you're very likely just starting in the federal government.
Yeah, you
right?
just
You're
got
not
hired.
protected by the union. You just
Yep.
got hired. So what does that
Hence,
imply?
probationary.
Yeah, you just, and that implies that the workforce that they're reducing or have reductionized are younger people. And one, that's a couple problems with that. One, they earn less because in these environments you get raises with longevity, with tenure. So one, you're reducing future workers, and from my point of view, reducing future pension contributors, which could create a problem down the line, right? Pensions work because, or need to work through backfilling new workers, right? Because you can't have a line in the sand and no future contributions to the pensions. The pensions are going to run dry. And guess who that's going to fall in? Because this is a federal pension, federally backed pension. If
Taxpayers.
yeah. So one, we're reducing the younger workforce, and more likely the workforce's wages aren't as high as some of the more tenured workforce, if that makes sense, right? If you're in the union, you've been there longer, you're making more money than someone who's just starting out.
Yep. So, and this article here is a USA Today article. It says roughly 220,000 of the 2.3 million, let's call it 10%, had less than one of the people at the federal government that got laid off.
Yeah.
So 10% of them had less than 1 year of experience in their current positions. And so I guess many, the 2.3 million that were targeted were all newer, but it sounds like even a smaller percentage, so 10% were really, really new. I don't know how long this probationary period is. I would assume it's like a year or something, but
I would assume so too.
yeah, I really don't know. Actually, I wonder if they consider that as like vested in the pension, which transparently, it's not an area that we work in. We tend to work with, clients that are at large W-2, large publicly traded tech companies as W-2 employees generally. So we just don't have a lot of expertise in, federal workers. With that said, I do know that there is amount of time that you have to work there until you get qualified for the pension. We can look that up. It's public. But
Correct. Yeah.
that might be what's considered to be the probationary period.
Yeah. So what you're doing a couple of things. You're entrenching some of the older government workers, which kind of doesn't really fix the government in terms of efficiencies, right? You got someone so entrenched who, again, I might get in trouble for this one too, but looking at corporate life, my favorite thing has been you'll typically find someone who can fit 10 hours worth of work into a 40-hour work week. They seem to, the old veterans seem to have ways to stretch out or create work that really leads to nowhere. Not to say that's every federal worker. It's just you tend to see that with bigger organizations.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
What is this buyout thing? So what was offered, and so 75,000 people took this.
Yeah, 75,000 took a buyout that I think goes into effect this September. I know the courts are jumping in and out, saying you can, you cannot. Again, that's kind of the thing with the check and balance, where we can't just suddenly cut or even offer early exits for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So 75,000 workers at this point have accepted that buyout offer. And if I'm going to round up and add that to let's assume all 220,000 probationary employees are going to get laid off before they hit union status. That's roughly about 300,000 workers. And at last check, the federal workers' average wage is $106,000 a year. I know I'm rounding quite a bit up on this because the majority of them aren't making full tenured salaries, but it's 300,000 times 106,000 would save about $32 billion a year in federal government employee wages. So we're still at a $2 trillion deficit. So that's still, yes, a lot of money.
Hey, chipping away.
Yeah, it's got to accumulate or kind of, you know what I mean, build up on itself. But it's still, we assume, got rid of 10% plus of the federal workforce and saved $32 billion. I think the cuts, if we're going to focus on the federal workforce, the cuts have to be a lot deeper. Because
okay, so
yeah, $2 trillion is 2,000 billion, right? Yeah, we got a ways to go.
We got a ways to go. Yeah, I think the initial, what I've can gather from what's going on in the news is there's a lot of like kind of almost cost overrun waste type stuff. You know, if you run $1 million budget, is there 50,000 that you can cut from that? You know, not a huge number, right? But I think what they're trying to figure out is like, where is that waste going? There's been reports, for example, of people claiming Social Security and they're well over 100 years old and things like this, right? And so to the extent that that stuff materializes and those checks then stop going, like how much is that actually just wasting? And so they're trying to kind of cut back on that. Now, look, I think they're not going to find $2 trillion of waste, especially when we know that, you know, our biggest two expenses are defense and entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, et cetera. Yeah. So there's undoubtedly some waste there too. But you know, the cut of $2 trillion is not an insignificant sum of money. So anyway, we'll see. I think this will be one of the most interesting things to watch as it continues to unfold.
Yeah, and I think to your point with waste, Chris, that's kind of was trying to get to with some of the older, more entrenched federal workers. I just kind of, from my experience, know that those are the types that tend to have some of the habits baked in, some of the worst habits baked in, and that's the way we've always done it mentality. Again, I'm painting with a just unfair broad brush, but it seems to me that you want to preserve some of the newer workers if you're going to treat federal workers in this manner. You'd want to keep some of the younger workers who don't have some of these bad habits entrenched, and then focus on some of the more tenured workers. And again, I'm talking about people's jobs, which really stinks. And I'm treating them like numbers. But again, if we're going to think about efficiencies and you really need to root out some of the inefficiencies, I think that's where you would really look towards, right?
Yeah, it's interesting thought, yeah. So let me back up here because I just want to explain. So this offer, so January 28th, virtually the entire federal workforce got this offer, and they were promised 8 months of pay and benefits to federal employees through September in exchange for their immediate resignation. So that was the offer. And this also says federal employees who choose to continue to work in the federal government are required to return in person, full-time, 5 days a week, embrace the new performance standards, don't know what that means yet, and be reliable, loyal, and trustworthy in their work, among other new reforms across the entire government. So that was the deal. 8 months of pay and benefits, but you got to resign right now. And 75,000 people said, let's do it.
Yeah, I have a friend in the FAA in Boston. He doesn't check his email regularly, and he got a notice, an offer, but like a day later, he got the offer rescinded. So in this time he didn't check his email, he got an offer, and then that offer pulled back. But
interesting.
Again, you're saying the FAA is critically undermanned, and then you're going to offer FAA early buyouts. So
what's he say? What's going on in the FAA?
It's been consistent for the last 10 or so years that he's been in the FAA, where they're working really long shifts, they have really periodic break schedules to help with some of the rest and alertness. But yeah, they have like an undermanned situation that has been the case since he's been an controller.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I don't know if this definitely couldn't improve because you're just short people. So maybe some things funnel back towards this, because we've had a lot of high profile, like airport incidents, right? So to reduce such a vital role, I don't know, to me it makes sense, but I think we understand what their approach is break everything, right? They're kind of the Silicon Valley approach, and move fast and see what breaks. And I think that's what we're experiencing, is the Silicon Valley approach to the government.
Should we talk about some of these departments? You've got a bunch listed out here.
Yeah.
Are these targeted departments, or what are you highlighting here?
Probably the known departments, and some of these I've never heard of, to be clear, and that's probably saying something, right? The biggest concern is the VA reduction, the Veterans Affairs, which to me...
But it's $98 million. That's nothing.
Yeah. In terms of staff cuts, the percentage of staff cuts in the VA was one of the higher groups, but that tells me that they're not making a ton of money, right? But veterans seems to be like a group that is perpetually underserved, and more cuts to that. I know $98 million. To be fair, I don't know what their full budget is, but I know it's not screamingly large, right, compared to other departments. But going down the list, the Consumer Protection Bureau, CFPB, is seeing like probably a complete wipeout. The Department of Education, this will probably end up in the courts, where they just want to completely close this group. The Department of Energy, a lot of people don't know this, but the Department of Energy actually handles nuclear weapons. So,
interesting.
So to cut that would be, again, what are they seeing that we're not? Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, the Department of the Interior. I guess they do the park services. And then the EPA, which kind of runs in line with conservative policies. General Services Administration. I didn't know this was even a department in the federal government, but they manage the real estate portfolio of all the buildings that the
leases
different
and
federal
stuff.
offices. Yeah. Office of Personnel Management. I'm guessing this is the HR. I don't know. I've never heard of this. Small Business Administration. U.S. Forest Services, which I would think will fold under the Department of Interior, and then U.S. Aid, which is probably the biggest headliner of all of them. So everyone's facing cuts in terms of like human resources, but to what extent, I don't know. But it should be something like a shot at the federal government to say there's whole departments in here that I didn't know existed, or let alone know what they do.
Yeah, that's
not to
wild.
say they're not vital, but it's just kind of
And that's what's so interesting about this, is some of these departments that have been kind of like flashing in the news. It's like, we have a department for that. Like, wouldn't that just be run by like that organization? Like the real estate thing. Like, oh, if you're the blah 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 department, wouldn't you just like have two people? Yeah, or just like have CBRE do it. They do everybody else's, and they probably also I don't know. They probably do that anyways. Yeah, I think some of these things. It's like, yeah, what do you do? That's interesting.
Yeah.
And is that like Office of Personnel Management? Is that like all of government? So are they? Let's assume that they're HR. Are they HR for the entire?
Yeah, I'm saying they're HR without knowing. I have no clue.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're just kind of guessing by the.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you had to guess what the Department of the Interior was, you probably wouldn't guess it is the National Park Services.
No clue. No clue.
Department of the Interior. It's like Homeland Security. I think that's what that means. Okay, so you've got a picture here of the 2025 federal budget and how we pay for it. So total government spending adds up to a nice round number of $7 trillion
per year.
Per year.
Yeah.
Per year. And we need to get to about 5 in order to actually have a break-even budget, not a surplus, but we're currently running at a deficit, as everybody knows. The deficit is, on this chart here, 1.865 billion.
Estimated, yeah.
And then the tariffs of 80 billion, are they just trying to highlight the, let's see, sources of financing? So are they trying to highlight what we have collected already on these proposed tariffs?
What they're estimated to collect. So
yeah, got it.
Tariffs
okay.
are essentially a tax on imported goods, right? So we're still going to buy imported goods. We're just going to pay more for them. And that's expected to generate 1% of the federal budget.
I see. Okay.
Which is $80 billion in tax revenue or tariff revenue, however you want to label
Okay,
it.
so the biggest ones here, Social Security is 22% of federal spending. Medicare is 16% of federal spending. Medicaid is 9%. Other mandatory, don't know what that is. I'm sure we could dig into that. Yeah. But it's a whole 12%. So a lot of stuff lands in this $855 billion spend deemed as other mandatory expenses. Defense is the same size, 12%. So we spend the same amount on other mandatory expenses as we do as defense. Curious to break that down. And then non-defense spending, I don't really know what this is. It's 14%. Also of note, 14% of federal spending is for interest payments. It is $952 billion a year.
That's the concerning part. Yeah,
$1 trillion. That's the concerning part. There's no immediate fix to that. I mean,
nope.
You can't just get rid of it. But yeah, that number's climbing for sure. On the income side, this is actually kind of wild. Income taxes are 37%, or they cover 37% of government spending. Payroll taxes are another 25%. It's just that's a lot. You'd think income taxes would be a lot more, but 37% and then 25%. Corporate taxes only 7%. Other is 3%, and we are missing 28% to get to 100. That is where that deficit and the tariffs come in. So this has been going on for a long time. This is no new news to everybody. I think everybody knows that the country's been running at a deficit for a while. This will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, and it's going to create a lot of headlines. I think at this point, no one knows, but the media is definitely having a field day with this. This is both on the left and the right, and you could either be mad at it or be joyful about it. I've been on record saying I don't know if this really impacts much in terms of the deficit in dollars. I'm doubtful with the approach just to avoid some of the union contract issues, that they're really going to save a lot on federal worker headcount. So I think I'd be surprised if we could save more, but we'll get to some of the more meat and potatoes of things versus some of the garnish on the plate.
I'd be shocked if we can get to $2 trillion, but it'd be amazing to see if the U.S. budget is balanced. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, we haven't got that since the 90s. Yeah.
All right, should we move to stocks?
Yeah, international, right? So
international.
Everyone's favorite redheaded stepchild has been just languishing in terms of performance, simply because you look at Europe, you look at Japan, you look at other developed international countries, and just not a lot to be excited about, right? No one has their version of Meta there, or Google, or Microsoft. And more concerning is how demographics are shifting. Yes, America is slowing in terms of population growth, but look at Europe. Look at Japan, right? We're mired in a 30-year population shrinkage in that country. So international has not been in the investor's favorite, but don't look. They're doubled up in terms of performance this year through 2 months, right? International's up 8.3%. S&P is up 4.1.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, these things will happen. Whether I think that the conversation is whether this is sustainable or going to be sustained.
What do you think?
I think cycles will move faster because the next chart from JP Morgan shows you when international beats the U.S., it's for years at a time.
Yep.
And vice versa. U.S. is in the middle of pretty dominant run, stretching back to 2008, where it's outperformed international. So I'm doubtful. I think the policies here in the States are more protectionist, which would give rise to the dollar strengthening again, because this outperformance is on the back of the U.S. dollar weakening, and is a reminder that when the dollar weakens, that tends to help international investments.
And is that what's starting to happen here?
Yes, yeah. You on an earlier call, you mentioned Canada, right?
Yeah.
Yes. The exchange rate initially after the election, the Canadian dollar really weakened. So did the Mexican peso.
Yep.
But they're re-strengthening relative to the U.S., but the U.S. dollar is actually weakening compared to all other developed currencies right now, which is actually a good thing for us.
Yeah,
Good
definitely.
thing for manufacturing because we need to export more. At least that's what the thinking is.
So do you think that is, oh yeah, you've got this next chart in here, US to Euro. But do you think that is what is propelling international so far this year versus just stuff's cheaper over there, stocks are cheaper over there or, whatever? Like, do you think it's mostly the dollar weakening?
I like to say so, but yeah, you're right. Buying a European stock or European company is a lot cheaper than buying NVIDIA here, like a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
So there's value there. Another thing that I've been reading, I don't know if nothing's really happened in terms of trade yet. So I saw an article that says international is winning the trade war. I'm like, what trade war? Like all we had to hang our hat on, which again, I'm not hanging our hat on tariffs, but it's 10% tariffs on Chinese made goods. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with all the talk, we have one tariff in place. That's it. So,
All right. Well,
yeah, I don't feel this is quite sustainable, but I don't think we're going to see these long stretches like we have. I know as recently as 2008. It seems like the global economy is more fluid than it has been.
I mean, with 50% of revenue of the Mag 7 coming from international,
It's kind of an
they're
international
benefiting
stock,
too. Yeah. So, and it's very high in the S&P too. It's a very high percentage. The world is different today than it was, 20 years ago, or I should say differently. U.S. stocks, the S&P is different today than it was 20 years ago because there is, these are global multinational companies at this point.
Yeah.
Especially when you're in the S&P because you're talking large cap.
Yeah, and I think if our domestic interest rates stay higher, all that does is re-strengthen the U.S. dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone else is cutting or has lower rates than we do.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's move to the penny. Did everybody see this in the news? Pennies take 2 pennies to make. Or 3 cents? Okay, this one says 3 cents.
According to
I read it
Doge.
too.
Yeah.
According to Doge, 3 cents. Okay, so somewhere between 2 and 5, probably. So we will no longer be minting pennies. And the follow-on article that I saw about this, which I thought was kind of interesting, is pricing psychology. 99, $7.99, $8.99, $1.99.
Yeah.
And it's expected that could go away because if you're paying via cash, well, there will be no way to give you back the exact change. And so are we going to see, $7 flat? Are we going to see $9.95, $6.95? I think in the world of fast food, I should have dropped this article in the deck. In the world of fast food, if they went from 99 to 95, so if they went down by 4 cents on all their pricing, I mean, it'd be billions of dollars. And so
Yeah.
that's not going to happen, right? They're going to
Yeah.
go up. So are they going to go up a penny, or are they going to go to, 7.10? What are they going to do, right? I think 7.05. I think this will be really interesting to see what prices move to.
I'm going to go back to the 80s here. Remember, I don't know if you've seen this, but Superman 2 with Richard Pryor, like
I don't
really
know.
old movie.
I'm not a movie guy. I don't know.
Okay, he's a criminal, Richard Pryor, who scammed his company by taking fractions of pennies off these transactions that have percentages related to them. So if you have a sales tax, you're going to end up with a fractional penny, right? He created a system that scooped up all these fractionals and he became a millionaire.
Oh, there you
We're
go.
talking about whole pennies here, upwards of
Yeah.
4 cents, right? So we're talking
Yeah.
probably hundreds of billions of dollars over time that is either gained by one side or lost by one side. I don't know. Just looking at history, I would expect corporations to make out like bandits in terms of collecting those 4 penny differences.
But this comes back to psychology, right? There's a whole reason why, like even Costco, right? Costco's pricing methodology, I think when you see a 97, that
It's
means like it's a final,
right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like a final clearance item, right? So like they can't do that anymore. They can't have a 29.97 anymore. They got to change that philosophy. So it's like,
Well,
you think about how their
that could happen
workers,
for cash,
yeah,
but wouldn't credit card people be indifferent to it because you
Of
still
course,
have penny
but-
transactions? You have to, right?
for totally, yeah. So credit card people, but so that boils down to like the retailer. I mean, in Costco, they still take cash. They have to. It's a huge retailer, right?
Yeah.
McDonald's, I'm sure they take cash. Starbucks, they take cash, right? There's a register in there. Now, if you're a food truck, you're just running it through Square or whatever, right? So you're not
Yeah.
taking any cash. So I think a ton of organizations are cashless, at which point, yeah, they don't care. Plus, thinking about rounding for taxes.
Yes.
Taxes
do you
are
round up,
different.
or do you round down?
10.1% or whatever.
Yeah.
You round up or you round down. So you're going to have something other than 5 cents, and then where do you round? Probably just turn that into a tip. That'll be a new thing. Anyway,
Don't say tip.
Don't say tip.
It's triggering. All right. Well, I got news for you.
yeah.
It costs $3.69 to create 3.69 pennies to create 1 penny, which
Okay.
it will save about $75 million a year by not minting pennies, and probably more to Brinks truck it, right? How much weight does a Brinks truck carry in terms of just pennies? But news for you, to produce a nickel, it's nearly 3 nickels, 13.78 cents to create 1 5-cent nickel. So
look at that.
the natural progression is, well, why not stop at the dime, right? Just the dime is profitable. It costs 5.76 cents to create a dime.
This is wild. This is the
Well,
coolest
dimes
shot I've
are
ever seen.
tiny. And why? in
Why don't we
terms of-
just change the nickel?
Yeah. And in terms of money sizing, why is the dime the smallest? Shouldn't the penny be the smallest and nickel progressively move? Like,
Yeah, and
wouldn't
all
that
of
just
their
make more
currencies
sense?
is like that,
Yeah, stupid.
But the nickel, like it's heavy, like it's thick and it's heavy.
Yeah, made from nickel metal, maybe. I don't know what metal goes in a nickel. It seems like gold at this point, or silver.
No
But
kidding.
but the cost of transporting, like, when you were a kid, you had a pocket full of quarters, and it felt
Oh,
like
yeah.
it was 1,000,000 pounds.
One of those little change things that when you squeeze
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
like it opens up. Yeah.
My dad had a food truck, and he had the little coin sorters with that you loop around your belt, and then
Yeah.
you just press the button and quarters come
Yeah,
out.
cool. Yeah.
That thing weighed like 20 pounds, I swear. So
I mean,
getting
I
rid of
remember
at
bringing
least-
rolls of coin to the bank. And I think the quarters were like $10, which is a ton. You're like
Yeah.
stuffing your quarters in there and counting them. You bring them to the bank, and then you exchange them for like a bill. And I remember as a kid, like that was a big deal.
Yeah.
No, that's not
And
right. The quarters I think are like $20. The dimes I
Is
think
it?
are $10.
A roll of quarters is, I thought 10. I think you're right. Something to look up.
How much is in a roll of quarters? $10.
Here. Yeah.
$10.
So
40.
And again, they were
40
so heavy.
quarters.
Going back to movies, like some people would use those as like homemade brass knuckles in movies. So you'd punch someone with a roll of quarters because they were so dense and heavy. But yeah, back to the point. If we got rid of just shipping this massive amount of weight around, that could save not only the cost of production, but the cost of transport, the cost of running it to a bank, right? Because if you're a Walmart, how much are you depositing in pennies through their coin counter machines? Like that probably unlocks quite a bit of things. But the issue is, which way do you round? If you round at all, do you treat credit customers differently than cash paying customers? Because credit, you could pay to the penny and it weighs no more or less or costs no more or less. I think it creates a lot of questions as well.
I'm still blown away by this. A nickel costs, so 5 cents costs 13.78 cents to make. 25 cents costs 14.68 cents. It's a cent different, but the value is 5 times as much. And it's like, that should be priority number 2. Priority number 1, okay, we don't need pennies anymore. Priority number 2, change the nickel. I suppose the challenge there is all the machines and all the sorting and all the weighing, because I think that's how banks do it, right? They weigh these, and they would have to design something that it functions the same if you're like literally putting it in a coin machine, because the coin machine has to read the currency correctly. And so you'd force all those machines to upgrade, which would be like
or my dad's coin belt from his food truck days. So
maybe the size could be the same. That's what I'm saying. Like, could you change like the inner components of it to make it, lighter? But then I suppose you open it up for potential, fraud and that kind of thing. I don't know.
If someone were forging nickels, I would hope they can beat 13 cents per produced nickel. It's like, again, this is an example of taking a scalpel to certain things versus cutting down to the bone. I know Doge is like touting that they're breaking things, which I don't personally agree with, but I do agree with making things a little bit more streamlined.
Yeah.
Right? But doing it smartly, doing it focused. Getting rid of the penny, I think, does make sense for a lot of reasons. And I think that would be a more palatable approach to what we're seeing now. I don't know how you stand with Doge, but there's some good, but there's seems to be a lot of potential issues with this.
We'll see. I think it's the most interesting thing to watch. So we'll see. Okay, cool. That's all the time we have today.
Yeah, get rid of the nickel
That's fun.
too.
Get rid of that. Figure out a way to make the nickel cheaper. I mean, that's just crazy.
Make it smaller than a dime and you're done.
Yeah, but then you got to change everything. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Like, you got to change everything.
Yeah, but they changed the head of the face of the quarter like every few months, and we got 50 variations of the quarter because all the states.
But that doesn't matter because the weight is the same.
Yeah.
So like if I'm stuffing it into, the bank coin things and then bringing it to the bank, it doesn't matter what's on the back of the quarter, the front of the quarter, it's the same weight and it's the same components. And so that's the key there. The nickel, you can't just turn around and make it smaller.
But if your business is so predicated on the size and weight of the nickel and you're unwilling to change that, I know that I'm talking about thousands of banks, but come on, we're producing 3x cost, right? It's like if you had a business and it costs you $15 to make a Subway sandwich, but you're selling for $5. That's the nickel, right? I
mean, you've got some good rationale, but I'm saying making change is hard.
Yes. And I think that's a big criticism with all this fast moving, because people's lives are changing, whether for better or for worse. They don't like the change component.
Right.
But yeah, get rid of the penny, get rid of the nickel.
I'm for it. I don't know how to do it, but I'm for it. Okay. Thanks
All right.
everyone for tuning in today. We'll catch you again in a couple weeks.
Bye, guys.
See ya.